The gavel slammed, ready to end her career in disgrace. They called Lieutenant Naomi Keller a fraud, a woman who wore a bronze star she never earned. The courtroom buzzed with scorn, the storm outside hammering the windows. And then, the doors opened. Secret Service agents stepped in, their earpieces glinting under the lights. Behind them walked President Michael Harrington unannounced, uninvited, unstoppable. In that instant, every accusation, every sneer, every file on the table once began to crumble, because the truth he carried would turn this tribunal upside down. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The gavel slammed, sharp and final, echoing off the paneled walls of the tribunal chamber at Naval Base Grayport. The air carried the smell of old wood and damp uniforms. A storm pressed against the windows, rattling the glass in rhythm with distant thunder. All eyes turned to the accused. Lieutenant Naomi Keller sat at the defense table, hands folded, posture rigid. She wore Navy service khakis stripped of insignia, ribbons, or medals. The empty fabric where honor should have been looked like a wound. The gallery was full. Sailors in dress whites, veterans with ribbons on their chests, officers leaning forward with the certainty of men who expected a conviction. Whispers passed from row to row, cruel and careless. Logistics clerk, fraud, pathetic. Naomi heard every word but gave no sign. Her gaze stayed on the table's grain, following the carved lines as if they were safer than the eyes staring at her. Silence was the armor she wore when nothing else remained. At the prosecutor's table, Commander Brett Langston smiled, broad-shouldered, clean-cut. His reputation was well known. No one had ever beaten him in a stolen valor case. His files sat stacked with precision, tabs marked, pages ready to be projected on the screen. He looked like a man already celebrating the win. Colonel Marcus Hale, presiding judge, cleared his throat. His voice rolled through the chamber, clipped and formal. This tribunal is now in session. The case of United States versus Lieutenant Naomi Keller. Charges impersonating a decorated combat officer, falsifying military records, and fraudulent display of commendations, including the Bronze Star. The words dropped heavy. The gallery shifted. Some leaned closer. Others smirked with satisfaction. Langston rose, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. "Your Honor," he began, his tone smooth, almost rehearsed. "This is not a complicated case." The accused attended veteran gatherings wearing a Bronze Star she did not earn. She hinted at involvement in special operations she could not have touched. She used those false claims to build credibility. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Heads nodded, eyes cut toward Naomi with disdain. She sat motionless, her profile sharp in the overhead light. Langston lifted the first file. Lieutenant Keller's official record entered into evidence. The screen lit up behind him. Naomi Keller, enlisted in 2013, discharged 2017, logistics specialist, 3rd Fleet, commendations, Navy Achievement Medal, nothing else. No combat tours, no advanced warfare training. Langston's voice sharpened. Her career was unremarkable. 4 years pushing supplies. No missions, no Bronze Star, nothing. The colonel leaned forward, expression unreadable. "Proceed." Langston waved to the bailiff. "Call the first witness." A retired Marine stepped forward, hand raised, oath spoken. His face was lined, his voice gravel. "I was in Syria, 2018. We know every operator who ran those raids. No woman was ever there. She told us she was part of it. Lies." The gallery muttered approval. A few shook their heads with disgust. Someone whispered, loud enough to cut the silence, "She's stealing the honor of the dead." Naomi didn't flinch. Not at the words, not at the stares. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, pale knuckles marked by faint scars no one bothered to notice. Her lawyer, Lieutenant Daniel Reeves, A nervous junior officer rose half-heartedly. Objection. Speculation. The colonel waved him down. Overruled. Continue. Langston pressed harder. He held up a photograph. Naomi at a small veteran event. On her jacket, a bronze star gleamed. This medal, he said with triumph, was purchased online. $42. Worn in public as if it were earned. The reaction was instant. A hiss of disapproval, arms crossed, shaking heads, the sound of dignity stripped away. Naomi's face remained calm, but her stillness carried weight. No defense, no protest, only silence. Outside, the storm grew louder. Wind hammered the windows. Thunder cracked like distant artillery. Inside, the air grew hotter, thick with judgment. Colonel Hale leaned back, fingers drumming on the docket. His voice carried finality. Lieutenant Keller, do you have anything to say in your defense? Every eye in the room shifted. Naomi lifted her head slowly. Her gaze was steady, her voice level. My record speaks for itself. Laughter broke out, bitter, harsh. The prosecutor smirked. To everyone present, it sounded like surrender. The colonel inhaled, preparing to read the tribunal's finding. His gavel rose an inch from the block, and then the rear doors opened, not gently, decisively. Two men entered in dark suits, shoulders squared, earpieces glinting under the lights. Secret Service. The room froze. The gallery went silent. The gavel stopped midair. Every head turned as the agents moved forward, scanning the chamber with practiced precision. Something impossible was about to walk through that door. The chamber held its breath. The two agents stepped aside, and behind them came a figure no one expected. Black shoes struck the floor in steady rhythm. Rain battered the windows. Lightning flared, and every sailor, veteran, and officer in the room froze. President Michael Harrington entered without a word. His presence filled the space like a shockwave. Colonel Hale scrambled to his feet, but Harrington raised one hand. Calm and absolute. Remain seated. Colonel. The order landed heavier than the gavel ever had. Hale sank back, pale, throat dry. The gallery stared in disbelief, whispers dying before they formed. Even Langston, the confident prosecutor, stiffened where he stood. Harrington walked straight to the front. His coat was damp from the storm, his expression unyielding. He turned his sharp gaze on Commander Langston. This trial, he said, voice even. Explain it to me. Langston swallowed but forced composure. Mr. President, the accused Lieutenant Keller has been impersonating a decorated combat officer. She displayed a bronze star she never earned. She implied involvement in classified missions. She dishonors those who truly served. The words echoed thin in the air. Harrington listened without interruption, then turned to Naomi. She had not moved. She met his eyes with quiet steadiness. Lieutenant Keller, Harrington said, his tone softer now. Do you know why I'm here? Naomi's voice was clear, though low. No, sir. The president reached into his coat. He placed a small wooden case on the judge's desk. The latch clicked open. Inside lay a bronze star, not polished for show, but marked with engraved numbers, a date, and a code. Gasps broke the silence. The engraving was unmistakable, an operational cipher never meant for public view. Colonel Hale leaned forward, eyes wide. This medal, Harrington declared, is Lieutenant Keller's, awarded for actions during Operation Iron Dagger, Syria, 2018, actions that saved 22 civilians and one intelligence officer under fire. The gallery erupted in disbelief. Murmurs collided, shock rolling through the rows. Hale pounded his gavel, but the noise barely slowed. Langston's jaw tightened. Mr. President, with all due respect, no woman has ever enough. Harrington's voice cut like steel. He stepped closer, his presence towering. That statement, Commander, is exactly why her service was buried. Records sealed, files scrubbed. She did not claim to be a SEAL. She never spoke those words. Others assumed it, projected it, used it against her. The room stilled again. The storm outside cracked against the glass, each thunderclap like a drum beat. Naomi sat straighter now, hands folded, expression unreadable. Yet for the first time, the pressure in the chamber shifted toward her, not away. Harrington continued, his tone carrying weight. Lieutenant Keller was part of operations so sensitive, most flag officers knew nothing. She followed orders. She kept silent. And now, arrogance drags her here, accused of lies when all she carried was truth. Langston tried again, voice strained. But sir, her service records sanitized. Harrington snapped. Do you believe classified programs leave their operators exposed in public files? His eyes burned into the prosecutor. If you ever question her honor again, your career will end before your next report is written. Langston went pale, his confidence shattered. He lowered his gaze, lips pressed tight. The president turned to Colonel Hale. This tribunal is over. All charges against Lieutenant Keller are dismissed, effective immediately. Hale nodded quickly, relief flooding his features. Yes, Mr. President. Harrington closed the case and tucked it back into his coat. He looked once more at Naomi. His voice softened, private yet heard by all. Lieutenant, you carried what this country asked you to bear. You did it with honor. Today, the burden ends. The gallery was silent, stunned into stillness. Naomi remained seated, unmoving, only her fists tightened against her knees. Knuckles white, the first sign of anything breaking through her, calm. The storm outside raged louder, rain hammering the glass like applause no one dared to give. The tribunal chamber emptied, but Naomi Keller was not released. Two agents in dark suits led her down a side corridor, boots echoing against concrete. The storm still rattled the windows, though deeper inside the base, the sound faded into silence. They reached a reinforced door marked with no sign. A keypad flashed, a lock disengaged, and she was ushered into a windowless room humming with quiet electronic noise. The air smelled faintly of ozone, heavy with secrecy. Admiral Rebecca Stanton was already waiting. She stood in crisp dress blues, ribbons precise across her chest, silver hair pulled tight. At her side, two intelligence officers remained silent, their eyes sharp. Near the wall, Commander Brett Langston shifted uneasily, his earlier confidence gone. Naomi took a seat at the steel table. Across from her, Stanton placed a thick folder stamped with the word compartmented, read across the cover. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of hidden jammers filled the silence. Finally, Stanton opened the file. Black and white photographs slid across the table. Dusty alleys, satellite captures of compounds, faces blurred, weapons raised. And then, a grainy frame of Naomi herself clad in civilian clothes, carbine low, leading civilians out of smoke. Langston stared, his jaw rigid. That's impossible. His voice cracked. Her record shows nothing. Stanton cut him off. Her tone was sharp, absolute. By design, Naomi looked down at the photo, her face in half shadow, hand raised to signal movement. Memories pressed in like the storm outside. She inhaled slowly, controlled. The Admiral tapped the folder. Lieutenant Keller was part of Project Halcyon, a unit formed in 2015. 14 women, trained to standards higher than BUD-S, higher than Ranger Assessment, higher than Delta's pipeline. They went where men could not. They operated where attention would kill the mission. The words hit the room like shrapnel. Langston shifted, disbelief written across him. 14 women, that program no record, no acknowledgement. It doesn't exist. Stanton's eyes locked on him. Officially, yes. Unofficially, it was our sharpest blade. Naomi's lawyer, Lieutenant Reeves, had been silent until now. His voice trembled as he asked, Why erase them? Why erase her? The admiral folded her hands. Because the country wasn't ready. Admitting women past Tier 1 standards would have ignited political firestorms. Congress would have demanded hearings. Media would have torn families apart. And enemies would have hunted them by name. So, we buried the truth. Naomi finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured. I stayed silent because I was ordered to. Not because I was afraid. The words landed heavy. For the first time since the tribunal, she gave her own defense not for the court, not for the gallery, but for herself. Langston's eyes darted back to the photo. If she was there, then what about the operation in Syria, Iron Dagger, the civilians? The intel officer Stanton flipped to the next page. A burning convoy. Civilians crouched behind an overturned truck. And Naomi again, crouched low, signaling them forward through gunfire. Naomi's hand drifted unconsciously to the pale scar on her wrist. She remembered the flash, the searing pain, the dirt under her fingernails, and she remembered the scream. Sergeant Lena Ward, Stanton said softly. Your teammate. She didn't make it out. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. The scar burned anew. She kept her voice steady. She saved them. Without her, none of them would have lived. The admiral's tone softened. You carry her sacrifice every day. That's why you never argued, even when accused. Naomi opened her eyes. Arguing would have betrayed her. Silence was discipline. She deserved that. Reeves stared at her, realization dawning. You weren't weak in that courtroom. You were obeying orders even now. Naomi gave a single nod. The room went still. Stanton closed the folder, pressing it flat. Now the situation has changed. The president himself revealed your medal. The cover is broken. Project Halcyon is no longer a ghost story. It's on the edge of daylight. The two intelligence officers exchanged glances, tension sharp in their silence. Langston finally spoke, voice low. If this gets out, the backlash will be enormous. Every record, every sanitized file, Congress will demand answers. Careers will fall. Stanton didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on Naomi. The question is simple. Do we keep the secret, pretend today never happened, bury it again, or do we step into the open, admit the truth, and let the world know who you were? The hum of the jammers filled the silence again. Naomi's gaze stayed fixed on the closed folder. Inside it were the pieces of her life missions denied, scars unacknowledged, a friend's death erased. Her hands clenched slowly against the steel table. She had carried orders for years, carried silence until it cut her deeper than any wound. Now the burden no longer belonged only to her. The storm outside roared again, pounding rain against concrete. For a moment, it sounded like applause waiting to break through. No one moved. No one spoke. The decision hung heavy in the air. And for the first time, Naomi Keller looked up, eyes clear, resolve forming like lightning. The morning after the tribunal, Naomi Keller sat alone in a secure room beneath the White House. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, the hum steady and cold. A steaming cup of coffee sat untouched at her elbow. On the table lay the bronze star, not the replica they had mocked, but the true one, the medal engraved with the date and code of Iron Dagger. She stared at it without blinking, eyes hollow from a night without sleep. The door opened. Admiral Rebecca Stanton entered, followed by Director Anthony Wells of Naval Intelligence. Their faces were taut, voices clipped with urgency. Stanton didn't sit. The president intends to address the nation tonight. He wants you at his side. He wants you to be the proof. Naomi didn't answer at once. She traced the metal with her fingertip, feeling the grooves of the engraving. Her voice finally came, low. If I step into that light, I lose the rest of my life. There's no going back. Wells leaned forward, his tone measured. Silence already nearly destroyed you. You were dragged into a courtroom, humiliated, nearly convicted for following orders. Keeping this hidden will not protect you anymore. It will erase you. Naomi's hands curled into fists. She remembered Lena Ward's scream, the fire, the scar carved into her wrist. If she stayed silent, Lena's name would remain ash, scattered and unseen. If she spoke, at least one truth would stand in daylight. She lifted her head, her voice steady now. If I go out there, I don't speak for myself. I speak for them, the ones who didn't come home. That's my condition. Stanton gave a single nod. Then that's what it will be. Hours later, the East Room of the White House was filled with reporters, veterans, and senior officers. Cameras were raised, microphones humming. The world was watching. President Harrington stood at the podium, his posture grave. His words carried across the hall and into living rooms across the country. For too long, truths have been buried, not because of lack of courage, but because of fear. Fear of politics, fear of tradition, fear of change. Today, that ends. He gestured to the side. Naomi stepped forward. She wore a plain civilian jacket, dark and simple, but her shoulders were straight, her eyes unflinching. The room fell silent as she crossed the stage. Harrington opened a small case on the podium. Inside gleamed a freshly struck bronze star. He pinned it carefully onto Naomi's jacket. This belongs to Lieutenant Keller. It was earned under fire during Operation Iron Dagger. Tonight, it will never again be hidden. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then thunderous, echoing through the chamber. Some veterans in the front row stood, hands raised in salute. Reporters shouted questions, but Naomi stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. I never asked for this spotlight, she said. My team and I served because people needed us, not because anyone promised recognition. For years, I carried this medal in silence, and in that silence, I almost lost myself. Her eyes scanned the crowd, unshaken. This is not about proving women belong in special operations. We proved that on every mission. This is about ensuring those who served in silence are never called frauds again. The real heroes are the ones who never came home. Tonight, remember their names, if you know them, and if you don't, know they existed. They bled, they gave everything, and they deserve to be remembered. The room stilled, the applause fading into reverence. Cameras flashed, but no one moved to interrupt. Harrington placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder and spoke softly, words caught by every microphone. Welcome home, Lieutenant. That night, headlines ignited across the country. Secret soldiers revealed, from accused to honored. Bronze Star truth shatters silence. Families of other women who had disappeared into obscure postings wept quietly at their kitchen tables. Veterans who once doubted now sat speechless, reevaluating everything they thought they knew. Naomi returned to her small apartment long after midnight. The city was quiet, rain still dripping from the storm. She set the medal gently on her desk beside the old tarnished one, past and present gleaming side by side. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. The burden had shifted. The truth was out. But as she turned to leave the room, she noticed a plain envelope on the table. No address, no stamp, only a seal pressed deep into the paper. A single word across the fold, Halcyon. She held it in her hands, feeling the weight. She broke the seal. Inside a single page. At the top, stamped in bold red, Halcyon reactivated. Naomi closed her eyes. The world now knew part of her story, but the next chapter had already begun. The truth might have been revealed. Yet the fight for what came next was only starting. The story of Naomi Keller was far from over.